Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to go over today, man. We have a lot coming out of the Middle East. As you can see, we have gas prices going back down. Um, we have heard that we are close to a deal, close to a deal, close to a deal, but now we are continuing the attack against the Islamic nation. You don't want to miss today's show. We have call lines open. Let me open the call lines. Actually, I apologize, y'all. If y'all have tried to call in and gotten nothing. Apologize. Call lines are now open, y'all. 540-251-7687. Please come join the channel and please follow. We are looking forward to growing with y'all, and actually, we are looking forward to actually start doing our drawings on the show here. But anyways, so further ado, let's get to the new. We have, peace talks has completely degraded, and yeah, it looks like we are back in action, should I say. But, I apologize for that. I hit the wrong button. We are trying to... Let me get this off here. Sorry about that. We are trying to get a cookout started for the community around here. So, we are going to be having a cookout probably in July for the channel. We're just going to be promoting for the channel out here in the public. We will be giving y'all the place time on Facebook for the cookout. I just want to make sure that I get everything before I put the date on Facebook. But anyways, further ado, let's get to the new. We have some breaking news coming in.
We're tracking literally the restarting of strikes on Iran potentially. They're calling them defensive strikes, but right now we have just seen U.S. forces conduct strikes on the Iranian coastline with missiles. Also, the Iranian attack boats have been targeted by the strikes. There are confirmed IRGC casualties, and also large explosions have been reported in Bandar, Abbas, and also some other unconfirmed reports as well. But we have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the breaking news as it is happening live on air, as we have been able to hear of significant developments coming out of the Middle East and CENTCOM's area of responsibility. As CENTCOM areas of responsibility has been able to confirm to Fox News just minutes ago that the United States of America has been confirmed to have conducted significant strikes on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran within the area of the Strait of Hormuz and also Corig Island. At this moment, we have confirmed that 4 IRGC members and sailors on board the fast attack boats have already been directly killed so far in the strikes conducted by the United States, and significant amounts of air defenses and other units have been hit and also destroyed within the area of the city of Bandar Abbas just miles away. According to different reports, we have been able to hear that these vessels were attempting to either intercept and harass a merchant ship that was in the area, and were also attempting to lay mines, at least some of them were, in the midst of the ongoing firefight. We have been able to hear that, however, while this action does appear to be a significant one, and we've also been able to confirm that separate U.S. strikes have been conducted on Corig Island, which is several hundred miles away from the point of conflict, we do understand that CENTCOM's area of responsibility has once again reiterated that this is not violating the ceasefire, and at the moment this has been purely defensive, and it's not attempting to create any form of a larger conflict. However, the Islamic Republic of Iran has already laid out the groundwork today, just hours ago, for the continuation of armed conflict with the United States, stating that any further attacks against Lebanon by the Israelis will lead to the opening of a resumed armed conflict, with the Iranians starting the conflict if necessary. Not long after those statements were made, the State of Israel's Air Force did start massive bombardments on the entirety of Lebanon, and have also stated that the deal is off pertaining to the ceasefire that the Israelis and Hezbollah were supposed to be abiding by, which had already collapsed several days ago and is now completely completely collapsed as of the official Israeli announcement. We have a lot of news to cover at this moment, and we are going to be making sure to get through each and every single bit of it, and also all of the breaking news that is developing as we're on air live. And we have breaking news coming out at this moment right now. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so far in the statements that CENTCOM has released, they have not confirmed strikes on Karg Island, which is responsible for about 90% of Iranian oil exports. They have not confirmed strikes there, but right now, NASA firm satellite data is showing that there are large-scale fires on Karg Island right now. So we're not really sure how to explain that. That could be maybe another element of the U.S. strikes that have just been conducted that maybe they didn't disclose to the public, but it does appear that, at least according to satellite data, there are very large fires there. So, of course, Karg Island, that is always a possibility that the U.S. could invade or attack that island and knock out all the Iranian oil infrastructure. Right now, I wish I could say what's going on there, but Enforcer, what do you make of that with these big fires breaking out?
I would have to say that at the moment, it's really hard to say exactly what's going on in Karg Island. We do have to indicate, however, that these larger areas that are on fire are open fields within the area of the island, which in prior attacks and during the armed conflicts from the 28th of February until the earlier part of April, we were able to confirm that there was a significant amount of Iranian air defenses that were based within the larger plains or open island areas on Karg Island, not within the oil infrastructure itself. So this may suggest that there have been attacks against Iranian air defenses on the island of Karg, although we cannot confirm that absolutely at the moment, as once again, folks, while we do have firm satellite data showing us that there are ongoing fires on Karg, we do not have any video or picture evidence on the ground from inside of Karg Island showing any sort of fires in the distance that could confirm that actual kinetic strikes have been made against Iranian air defenses. This may be another form of fire that's being recorded on firm satellite, but it is quite coincidental that it is quite literally within the same areas where Iranian air defenses had formerly been seen during the armed phase of the conflict.
Yeah, I would say so. Also, by the way, folks, we are trying to sort through the story right now. We have the official statement from CENTCOM that we'll jump into in just a second, but I will say there's a couple of discrepancies with the story. We're hearing that allegedly last night, U.S. fighter jets struck a couple of IRGC fast attack boats near Larak Island, which is generally in the same area as the Iranian toll booth, where they toll booth the vessels going through the Strait of Hormuz. But the catch is, though, we just heard about explosions just about an hour ago. So I'm not really sure how that is coordinating and lining up right there. But I think there's clearly more to the story than we're being told right now. So it could be more severe than we think at the moment. But Enforcer, if you can walk us through so far what's happened so far, and I'll keep an eye on the breaking news and let you know if I spot anything else.
So as many of y'all will know, we have been seeing that the situation between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran over the past 24 hours has been rapidly de-evolving after we were able to hear from the president 48 hours ago that a peace deal was just around the corner and was going to be announced within hours. From the little bit of information that was leaked out by some officials privy to the matter of what the deal actually pertained to, the U.S. public and a large part of the U.S. government, including significant elements of the Congress, started to put up significant opposition to the idea of the peace deal as it was being seen by most people in the public and around the United States. This then led to the President of the United States largely backing off of most of the agreement that they had made with the Islamic Republic of Iran, which was corroborated by the Iranians, stating that the president now appeared to be retreating on the agreements on key issues that had already been made, which appeared to have been giving away a significant amount of strategic control of the United States of America within the Middle East over to Iran, and also relinquishing control permanently of the Strait of Hormuz to the Islamic Republic of Iran. We started to understand that that was being backed off of at the very end of the day yesterday. And we were then able to see that just a few hours ago today, before all of this happened, a statement was made by the President of the United States stating the following: the enriched uranium, nuclear dust, will either be immediately turned over to the United States to be brought home and destroyed, preferably in conjunction and coordination with the Islamic Republic of Iran, destroyed in place or at another acceptable location with the Atomic Energy Commission, which I've never heard of. I think he's talking about the IAEA, or its equivalent, being witness to this process and event. So it appeared that there was now a doubling down on prior claims by the United States that the United States of America had to see that the enriched uranium or near weapons grade uranium in the Islamic Republic of Iran, enriched to a 60 to 70% refinement rate, would have to be destroyed in some way, shape, or form, or the United States was going to do something to them. Hence the idea of the words immediately turned over. This is not the first time time we've ever seen statements or ultimatums like this given out of the office of the President of the United States. However, we did start to see the development start to change rapidly afterwards, as news of air defense fires and also explosions began to occur around the city of Bandar Abbas, which was our first indication that anything was going on within the Islamic Republic of Iran, which happened about 40 minutes to an hour ago. We were able to hear that during this time, there did seem to be some sort of explosions and smoke plumes that were rising from the area of the airport, and according to some eyewitness reports, they stated that there was a sound of 3 loud explosions in quick succession, and it was very close. It seemed to be from a hunting base, or an air base more so, is what they actually meant to say. In particular, it's actually the 9th Air Force's base out of the Islamic Republic of Iran, here on the outskirts of Bandar Abbas. This also serves as an international airport as well, but as y'all can see, it does have significant housing and facilities for the Islamic Republic of Iran's Air Force here on the northern end, and from what we generally understand, this seems to be the area that may have been targeted. A significant amount of Bandar Abbas's air defenses are actually based around this airfield, and therefore, from what we're hearing now, the United States was attacking and destroying the Iranian air defenses that were apparently based around the perimeter of the Bandar Abbas International Airport, or the 9th Flight Wing's Air Base, here also at the same airport. We did get to see some smoke rising from this area in this one picture here, which shows a very light wisp of smoke rising from the area of the airport, which we believe is the aftermath of some sort of a direct U.S. guided ordnance impact on an air defense site around the area of the airport, which led to the destruction of the air defense system. We're not entirely sure what kind of air defense systems were around or present at this airport during the time of the strikes, as we have rarely ever seen surface-to-air missile systems operational at this point in time after the United States was able to destroy, along with the Israeli Air Force, the large majority of their missile-based air defense systems earlier on during the armed phase of the conflict. However, it does appear that from later CENTCOM statements, there is a decent possibility that some of these may have actually been radar-based surface-to-air missile systems, as they were stating that these were destroyed for defensive purposes, which would suggest that they were able to attack the U.S. aircraft out inside the Strait of Hormuz, which we're about to be talking about in greater detail here in a moment. We also were able to hear more reports once more that the Bandar Abbas airport was struck by some sort of missile or some sort of guided ordnance, and we also were able to see a slight amount of gun-based air defense fire coming from Bandar Abbas in this very short clip here as well. And we can see the small bursts of air defense fire and their proximity fuses going off at a specific distance in air, once again showing that there was air defenses active in Bandar Abbas during that time. Just a little while later, about 20 minutes ago, we were finally able to get information that the United States of America had been confirmed to have engaged and fought in battle the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps within the Strait of Hormuz, and had directed strikes against the Iranian Air Force near to the area of Bandar Abbas, confirming that these are U.S. strikes that have been conducted at this moment. To get y'all into a little bit of the details here of what exactly happened in the sequence of battle, before we get into the larger diplomatic sense that's being made out of this at this point, we were able to hear that according to some officials, an Iranian source told me, according to Ali Hashem, the heavy gunfire heard near Bandar Abbas erupted after the IRGC targeted a vessel at sea, followed by U.S. fighter jets striking IRGC naval boats in the Gulf. According to the source, several IRGC Navy personnel were killed in the attack. We have also been able to confirm at this moment that 4 IRGC members have been killed so far in the strikes by U.S. forces within the Strait of Hormuz. We also were able to confirm that as well once more, as 4 IRGC members have been killed after strikes from U.S. aircraft within the area. According to further information that has now been released to Fox News, U.S. forces, according to the U.S. Armed Forces, struck missile launch sites, we're assuming surface-to-air missile launch systems or anti-ship missile systems, and Iranian boats trying to place mines in southern Iran, according to the U.S. military, which spoke to Fox.
Yeah, that's a little bit strange right there. I will say that. That's one of the discrepancies right there that I'm a little bit questionable about. The U.S. is calling these defensive strikes, meaning they struck back after Iran did a strike on a U.S. target or a U.S. vessel of some sort. The problem with that is, though, the U.S. Struck missile launch sites. They also struck boats, and also said they specifically struck the boats trying to place more mines near the Hormuz Strait. So that sounds not very defensive, if I'm being perfectly honest. That sounds like offensive strikes. So I wonder if they're simply calling them defensive, so that way they don't trigger an argument about the War Powers Act. That could be a reason why they're calling it defensive, because it seems a little strange to me that the story about what started this, what allegedly Iran did to the U.S., is a little bit vague, to say the least. So what do you think?
I would have to say that it's a really confusing story. It's really hard to make any sense of it. To me, folks, it sounded like the United States just decided to blow up the boats that were attempting to lay more mines. Right now, I don't think we see any commercial vessels, except for a handful, that are currently within the strait. And if we take a look at them, all of them seem to be Iranian flags. So I don't really know. Wait a minute, was that a landing? What the hell? Oh, that's a landing craft. But anyways, outside of that, apparently it's a commercial landing craft. Never heard of that before. But outside of that, it does appear that there are no vessels at this moment with open transponders on in the Strait of Hormuz that could have been targeted or harassed by the IRGC to lead to the United States being, having the proper kind of justification to try and claim that this is some form of defensive strike. It appears, if anything, IRGC fast attack boats went back out into the strait, as they have normally been doing for a month and a half, almost 2 months now, and we're attempting to lay more mines into the minefield within the Strait of Hormuz. And apparently, for some reason today, the rules of engagement may have changed to where U.S. armed forces were told that if any Iranian fast attack boats entered the area of the minefield, they were to be engaged and destroyed regardless of what they were doing. And I'm supposing that during the time of that strike, the Iranians may have started to fire off surface-based air defense missiles at those U.S. aircraft, which then led to the additional strikes or suppression of enemy air defense actions that were conducted on the surface air defense batteries on shore at Bandar Abbas. That's generally what I'm assuming is actually the story that's coming out at the moment, because there's been this floating story out there, folks, that apparently the United States was attempting to defend some kind of a vessel that was within the area of the Strait of Hormuz. And that's something that we should be able to confirm right now on transponder. If there is a vessel within the Strait of Hormuz that is not Iranian flagged, it has only been about 40 minutes to an hour since the incident unfolded, and at the speed at which ships travel, which is around 8 knots, which is about 10 miles an hour, they would still clearly be inside of the Strait of Hormuz if the Iranians were actually trying to harass that ship and it was there to be at the site of the incident that some people are claiming was the reason why the U.S. is beginning the strikes. We just don't see that at the moment, and that's what's leading me to believe that our story of the U.S. attacking the Iranian boats that were trying to lay more mines in the minefield is probably the more accurate of the two stories that we've been seeing so far at the moment. We have also...
Yeah. It's a little bit interesting, by the way, that if Iran was the one to violate the U.S. vessels or U.S. forces, if Iran was the one to truly start this engagement right here, and the U.S. simply responded defensively, then why is the U.S. going out of their way to say that the ceasefire is still in effect and they'll still continue to exercise restraint under these circumstances? That seems like a strange thing to say if Iran just violated the ceasefire blatantly yet again. That seems like an odd thing to say, unless maybe the U.S. is trying to, I guess, back off of any possible escalations beyond this, possibly. I don't know. It's very odd.
Yeah, I would have to say it is all rather peculiar, and a lot of it isn't really adding up at this point right now, folks. Of course, we do have to tell you all that the story just happened. We could make up at this point to try and fill in the pieces as to what led to the United States conducting these attacks, because on the Iranian side of things, we just don't really have any proof at all of any Iranian attacks. We only have proof of U.S. attacks, at least at the moment. But a lot of people right now aren't talking about the possible Iranian response that is going to be coming from this action. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the question is, will Iran retaliate to these so-called defensive U.S. strikes on Iranian territory? And it looks like 68% said yes, Iran will launch strikes very soon, while 19% said no, Iran will keep stalling the talks, and about 9% said there's a 50-50 chance that Iran ends up retaliating. So right now, we have not gotten a direct official statement from the Iranian regime right now about this. I think they're currently trying to sort through what's happening themselves, because you got to remember that the leadership inside of Iran is currently holed up in a bunker somewhere. We don't even know where that bunker is at, and I think the intelligence services are still trying to figure out where he's actually at. So that's the problem. It takes time to get this news to the leadership and then an order back to the IRGC. So unless the IRGC decides to act on it completely its own accord, then it could be a minute before we see a retaliation. But I am seeing some early reports that allegedly Iran's Ghalibaf, who's apparently an official inside of Iran, is apparently warning that a decisive response could be near and the deal might be off. So we can't confirm that for a fact yet. We're waiting on corroboration of that statement right there. But of course, this is an escalation, so I'm sure Iran will do something about it, but I'm not totally sure what they're going to do. So I would say out of all the options here, 69% saying Iran will launch strikes soon. I would tend to lean that way because I would be surprised if Iran did nothing about this. That would seem a little bit odd. So I think the deal is off. The deal wasn't going anywhere, by the way. It was pretty much dead in the water anyway. So they pretty much started the fighting this evening, and I think it's going to probably escalate. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would actually have to say that I am not of the opinion of the majority this time, and I would have to believe that the Iranians are probably going to try and ignore this or keep stalling the talks because it would most likely be within their strategic imperative at this point to be able to try and continue that. The reason why is because the Iranians, by the way, are never actually legitimately talking to the United States about reaching a deal. Right now, the Islamic Republic of Iran is trying to stall for as long as they possibly can, and if they can possibly let this slide and just keep the blockade in place like it is right now without forcing the United States into an active war against Iran again, which could possibly get the leaders that are going to make the decision to respond to this killed, and could also see that the Strait of Hormuz is forcibly reopened, they're probably considering that to be a risk that they don't want to take just yet. And they might want to sit this out and wait a little bit longer because with each passing week and each passing month that the Iranians are able to successfully stall and generally not force the resumption of the conflict once more, they are able to see that the economic situation in the Western world is going to continue to become more perilous, worse, and put even more pressure on the United States to try and meet Iran's demands. Meaning that they generally don't need to force themselves to respond to any actions at this point unless if it is absolutely necessary. Like, for example, if the United States starts going into the Strait of Hormuz and just starts clearing house, they would have to respond to that point and the war would be back on. But once again, the action of Iran getting back into a full-blown war is largely in the U.S.'s court, not theirs. Because in their current condition right now, they can sit back and not fire a single shot and still have a significant amount of leverage against the United States and the entirety of the outside world by just continuing their blockade of the Hormuz and not forcing themselves to re-enter into a full-blown conflict. So I would actually have to say there's a chance, of course, that they could respond to this militarily and quite significantly. But I'd also have to say that there is a fairly significant chance, especially if they're trying to play this as a pretty long-term game here, at least in the short term, over the next several months, that they might just try and ignore this, say that it was just a little defensive action by the United States or just, brush it off and then just keep moving on with the blockade and stalling in the talks. They might be willing to do that. So I would have to say maybe. I'm kind of up in the air on it.
Yeah, I would say maybe so. They could just be sitting back and simply just trying to survive and letting the stuff take its course that's going to hurt the United States. That could be their strategy, possibly. I would say at this point, though, it is a bit strange that y'all might notice that Iran's response time to stuff like this is severely reduced. And like I had mentioned, that's because the leadership is holed up in a bunker somewhere. So we had heard before that the IRGC, the military forces in Iran, have largely been given operational freedom for the most part to do what they want, and the IRGC is the hardliners inside of Iran. They're the ones who want to attack everybody and go to war with literally everyone. So we haven't seen a response from them yet. We did hear that apparently there was an exchange of fire near Bandar Abbas with U.S. forces, but we didn't hear of any losses. I think the Iranians claimed they shot down one of the recon drones in the area, but that's not really much of anything. If they shot down an operational jet, that would be a lot different. But if it's just a drone, it's obviously a loss, but it's not too bad. So we'll have to see see what they do. I'll be very curious to see what they even say about it, if anything.
Honestly, I'd be interested to know as well. It's it's a little interesting to me how this whole thing's being handled right now on the foreign policy side, because we were able to hear that according to CENTCOM and also the U.S. military, at least according to their statements to Fox News, the U.S. military eliminated 2 IRGC vessels caught laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz and struck a surface-to-air missile site in Bandar Abbas targeting U.S. aircraft, with a senior U.S. official saying these were defensive strikes and do not indicate the ceasefire is over. I don't really know how it wouldn't indicate that the ceasefire is over, because usually, folks, the whole definition of a ceasefire pertains to ceasing fire. Now, that usually means stopping the shooting. If everybody's shooting in the middle of a ceasefire, then there is no ceasefire. A ceasefire only exists when both sides cease firing, as in the name ceasefire. So I don't really know how in the world we keep on saying that there is not a violation of the ceasefire in all of these different incidents that Iran has conducted and we have conducted, because each and every single one of them truly is a violation of the ceasefire and a resumption of the armed conflict if we looked at it through a normal lens to a common individual of what a ceasefire is, and when a ceasefire ends, it's when the shooting starts again. So a little bit interesting with that, at least on the foreign policy side, because it seems like the U.S. is attempting to completely back off or just run interference and claim that these actions of Iran and us today were neither a violation of the ceasefire. We also were able to hear that once again, well, the U.S. stated, well, the CENTCOM stated to Fox that the U.S. has conducted self-defense strikes in southern Iran against missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. That's the official story that was put out to Fox News just a little bit a while ago on what is exactly happening down there. Now, one thing that is interesting to me, however, folks, is that there has been a significant mention here of missile launch sites in pertainment to surface-to-air missile defense systems. According to CENTCOM during the armed conflict, and according to the president, by a numerous statement that has been made over months, the Islamic Republic of Iran is not in possession of a single radar-based surface-to-air missile system in the entirety of the country since the armed conflict started a couple of weeks in. This is a little bit interesting, as it is suggesting that the Islamic Republic of Iran does still possess and is operating radar-based surface-to-air missile defense systems and still have some operational around Bandar Abbas. This is also suggesting, if we're claiming that this is an entirely defensive action, that those surface-to-air missile defense systems did pick up the U.S. aircraft out in the Strait, fired at them, and then that forced the United States to conduct a suppression of enemy air defense action where we targeted those radar systems and destroyed them, most likely with AGM-88 harms. If that is the case, that means the Iranians still do have mobile surface-based air missile systems that they can use to defend against incoming U.S. attacks and aircraft in the future, which is completely changing the story that we've heard so far from the U.S. government, that all of those systems have been completely and utterly destroyed, as there was one around Bandar Abbas that was operational that has apparently been targeted and destroyed at this point right now from what we're hearing. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear of air defense fire occurring within the major city of Isfahan, and also within the smaller Iranian city within their western provinces of Kermanshah, which is within the Kermanshah province. Information of that came out from eyewitness reports. We have not been able to see any video or picture evidence to confirm that yet at the moment, but it does appear that those are the eyewitness reports coming out at this time. We also were able to hear that air defense fire was also occurring in Qom. This we actually did have footage for, so here is the clips of the air defense fire going off in the city of Qom. We see that object up there in the sky in this clip. And our next clip, we can actually see the object being filmed once again. It's either a star or a drone. We've seen a decent amount of drones over Iran during the ceasefire period. And we also Qom is pretty deep into Iranian territory, isn't it? Isn't that like deep mainland? This is very deep. This is actually, I think, about 60 miles south of Tehran itself. So this is very far inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And it is confirming that there was a larger air defense battle or some sort of a firing that happened probably over Iranian skies pretty much throughout the entirety of the western and central areas just south of Tehran. Yeah, that is interesting. Also, we did hear allegations of air defense fire in Isfahan as well. There was a couple of different places that were not on the coastline that were generally having at least unconfirmed reports of air defense fire. So,
We have some shout outs to do, y'all. We have R. Gates. I appreciate the follow on Kick there, or I'm sorry, on Rumble. Belronda, 776. I really appreciate the follow. Um, Trust Verify, really appreciate the follow. Eagle Alien 52, appreciate the follow. Definite Bastard, appreciate the follow. Definitely, definitely really support. Definitely appreciate the support on the channel, and I really hope we can actually get to our goals here soon, so we can actually start the drawings for y'all. I'm excited to do that for y'all, and actually start doing the free giveaways for y'all. We have Xbox, we have Xbox controllers, and we also have PC up for grabs. So you don't want to miss the drawings. We will be having a live show, special broadcast on the show for the drawings. We'll be coming live and giving everybody a number that's on the platform that we're doing the drawings on. Every platform that we're on, we have drawings for. We have certain goals that we got to meet on our platforms, and then once we actually meet our goals, and then we actually will start doing our drawings. 200 for Rumble, 200 for Kick, 500 for YouTube, and 200 for Twitch. I believe YouTube is probably gonna be the first drawings. But I mean, we'll see, because Kick's starting to catch it.
I suspect that we'll get more details about what's been happening here, but it sounds to me like it's more than just defensive strikes. Like, at this point, I would be leaning heavily toward this is a lot more than defensive, because we had heard, I think it was like a week and a half ago, that the U.S. forces were considering launching short but very decisive strikes on Iran, simply to basically prod them to negotiate in good faith, which is a strange concept, by the way, but that was the idea behind it. And the U.S. wanting to keep the ceasefire in place after they just conducted these strikes kind of sounds like it lines up with that report that came out a week and a half ago, that maybe these strikes right here are not defensive, and they could be trying to prod the Iranians to make a deal or else, and this is like a warning shot, perhaps.
Yeah, I would have to say that it is an interesting one, and that may be the case. It may possibly be what is going on right now. But there's also another interesting thing that we do have to point out, folks, that's happened on the side that doesn't have to directly deal with Iran and the U.S., which might support that kind of an idea that Matthew just put out a little bit better. We did get to hear that hours ago, the Islamic Republic of Iran did state officially, and this was quoted by Al Jazeera, that they have warned the United States that any Israeli strikes on Beirut or its southern suburbs would seriously jeopardize ongoing efforts to end the war and could derail the diplomatic talks altogether. We have then heard that inside of Israel, which apparently the Israelis just realized that this was their ticket, their free meal ticket out of ceasefire, they said that they were going to start launching major strikes against Hezbollah, specifically against the Dahia suburb of southern Beirut, which is one of those specific areas that Iran mentioned that if it was bombed, it might end up restarting the entire war altogether once again. We have now seen that a large amount of people are beginning to flee Dahia in droves, hoping to escape the upcoming Israeli airstrikes that will most likely be happening within the next several hours at the point of this stream that's happening right now.
That's a lot of people trying to get out of there. Honestly, this is like the scenes we saw out of Tehran when the war got started first.
Honestly, it is. It seems to me like the people of Dahia in the southern suburbs of Beirut are really getting a good understanding that the war is coming back around again, and it's mostly going to be back up to the fervor and ferocity that it was prior. But a lot of people are actually talking about this development at the moment right now, and a lot of people are wondering what the U.S. is doing with these sorts of strikes that are being conducted on the Islamic Republic of Iran. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so this poll went up 10 seconds ago, so this one's a very fresh poll right here, so I will have to give this one some more time right here. Well, actually, it looks like it's stabilized already. It's already 1,000 votes on it, so we'll go ahead and address it anyway. The question says, what is the U.S. doing with these strikes on Iran? It looks like it's pretty much stable at this point. 37% said short, decisive strikes as a warning to the IRGC, while another 37% said they're trying to reopen the entire war tonight, and 11% said it's purely defensive strikes on Iran. And I am with the first 37%. I believe these are the short, decisive strikes as a warning that we had heard about a week and a half ago that were being thought and considered about. These sound like these are those strikes right here. They do not appear to be trying to reopen the entire war tonight, as if they were going to do that, they wouldn't be trying to adhere to the ceasefire still. So I don't buy the defensive strike story, folks. I'll be honest with y'all. I really don't buy that. I know that's the official CENTCOM statement, but that doesn't make much sense. In fact, that makes very little sense whatsoever. The story just doesn't add up. So it sounds like short, decisive strikes, which me personally, I'm in favor of restarting military action on Iran because I don't think the deal is going to work out. Even if you can reach a deal, the Iranians aren't going to uphold their end of it. So me personally, I'm in favor of starting the war again. I know that to some people that sounds awful, like, oh, he wants to start the war. Well, it's better than negotiating endlessly and letting the Iranians rebuild their military. It's better than that. So if it is short and decisive strikes, the logic behind that is that they're trying to get the Iranians to negotiate fairly. But I think it's going to have the total opposite effect. It's going to make the Iranians more enraged, and it's going to make the hardliners, it's going to make those arguments a lot stronger against the U.S. military, and we're probably going to see the Iranians retaliate. That's my guess. So it'll probably have the opposite effect. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that generally I would be with the two largest groups. This is most likely short, decisive strikes. The story is just not adding up at the moment, folks. There's this mythical ship in some versions of the story that were out there that the Iranians were trying to harass, that forced the United States, against our will, mind you all, to fire onto the Iranians to defend this ship. That's one of the stories that's been put out there right now. The problem is that we haven't seen this ship anywhere in the world. This is either a fictitious ship or it's a ghost ship that never existed that we were defending. And also on top of that, the other thing is that we laid out the precedent during Project Freedom that we wouldn't defend a ship for squat once it entered the Strait of Hormuz. Those ships were entirely on their own, and plenty of them ended up learning that out by getting hit by a whole bunch of IRGC anti-ship missiles, anti-ship drones, or being boarded and seized, with the U.S. being nowhere in sight to stop or defend those ships from those Iranian attacks. So clearly we have an ongoing precedent that the United States does not conduct actions to defend ships of that type. We didn't even do that when we declared that we were going to be defending ships within the Strait of Hormuz, and now we've stated that Project Freedom is on an indefinite hold at the request of Pakistan. So why in the world will we do it now? This will really be the complete opposite time of when we would do such a thing like this. So that clearly did not happen. What happened today is that the Iranians, skittered out into the strait with their fast attack boats, tried to lay a couple of more mines, and in the midst of that, we ended up blowing up those boats, blowing up air defenses in Bandar Abbas, and at the moment, we've possibly hit Korg Island as well, as we're seeing fires on the island, which may suggest that air defenses in that area have been hit as well. And if that is the case, we're certainly seeing that these are some form of short, decisive strikes, which may lead to a reopening of the war, or may just stand as a warning, and the Iranians may decide to not respond and wait for their blockade to continue to cause further economic damage here in the West. That's what I'm thinking at the moment, but generally we'll still wait and see if we have any more news or information coming out, and hopefully we do. So Matthew, what do we got that's coming out so far right now?
Okay, so let's do a quick check on Flight Radar 24 and see what the air activity is over the region. It appears to be, it looks like some Stratotankers and Globemaster cargo aircraft lurking around the area. I'm also hearing reports that there's a couple of Pegasus aircraft as well, currently circling around the Persian Gulf, like in the middle of it. It looks like they might have turned their transponder. There's one of them actually right there. There's one with its transponder off, because there's a couple in here, but a couple of them are not on the radar or not on ADS-B for right now. So it does appear that they're actively supporting more air operations in the area, but we've still not gotten official statement from the Iranian officials. That's what we're currently waiting for. We're waiting to see what the Iranians are going to say about all this stuff right here, because they've been notably silent as of right now. So, they're saying that last night is when some of these skirmishes started, and then just a couple hours ago we heard the explosions on the coast. So it's weird. They're not saying much of anything right now. So it's kind of a strange silence.
And it is a little interesting because right now I think we are seeing that the story has started to get a little quiet again quickly once more. But it does appear that we're seeing that there are some U.S. air activities over the Persian Gulf at the moment, and generally over the broader area of the Horn of the Southern Arabian Peninsula, as we're also seeing KC-135s, and we're also seeing a C-17 resupply flight currently making its way into the UAE, it appears, at the moment. So It does seem for now there is certainly some U.S. era activity going on, but at this moment, this is actually all of the news that we have cataloged at this moment about the event.
Do you have the post from the president about getting back the enriched uranium? That's another big piece of the story right there.
Oh yeah, we covered that first. That was the first thing covered on air.
Okay, let's go back to that for a second because I want to take another look at that real quick because I didn't have a chance to see it earlier. I was too busy in the chat. Let's see here. So this right here was a very notable thing. This came out apparently, I think this came out right after the strike news came out, actually. It came out like shortly after it. So a lot of people were expecting maybe the president was going to announce these strikes himself, but he didn't really announce the strikes. He mentioned the enriched uranium. Also, by the way, for the people mentioning the time right there, Fitex News is not U.S. based to my knowledge, so that's why the time's different on the post. They're just in a different time zone. It's not a conspiracy or anything like that. I had like 3 different people email me talking about it as a conspiracy. So it's totally normal, by the way. It's a real post. But the whole thing with this right here, he said the enriched uranium, where's that post?
Here it is.
The enriched uranium will either be immediately turned over to the United States to be brought home or destroyed, preferably in conjunction and coordination with the Islamic Republic of Iran, destroyed in place or at an acceptable location. So what this indicated to me right here is they do not have an agreement on the nuclear dust right now, as he's calling it, which is not really dust. It's a lot of kilograms of highly enriched uranium. They don't have a deal on that. So the whole story about the deal being close to being finalized was not really the case, as many people expected, including ourselves. And this right here is proof of that. So the deal's not going to work. Like we keep saying that over and over and over, but the more evidence keeps coming out, it's just showing that our analysis is correct. A deal is simply not possible. Also, I see some people saying, well, what's he mean destroyed in place? I think he's referring to send in like the IAEA, the independent nuclear body, to go in and monitor the destruction of that material. I think that might be what he's referring to right there. I think he mentioned it in the post, the Atomic Energy Commission. So I don't know if Iran's never going to agree to that. I mean, what are you thinking, Forrester? Would Iran ever agree to that or not?
Hell no. No, they would not agree to this. It's certainly just, it's just something they wouldn't. They've already stated that the nuclear issue is non-negotiable, so this is a dead end at this point. The Iranians will never agree to anything, and the U.S. can run its head into a brick wall 90 times trying to get them to agree to something, but they've already said that they're not. And a no is a no for the larger part when it comes to an answer, so you can come back and ask them to give up the uranium 1,000 times, they're still going to say no. And in the current condition they're in strategically at the moment, with the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz still remaining intact and largely unchallenged, they really have no reason to even consider giving up the enriched uranium, because it's not like the United States has any leverage on them. If anything, the Iranians have economic leverage over us if they keep the blockade going.
Yeah, I would say so. So the thing to me is this. If Iran does not retaliate to these so-called defensive strikes tonight, does that mean that the U.S. is going to wait indefinitely for a deal that will never materialize to arrive? Or are they going to take further action on Iran, even if Iran does not retaliate? That's my question. I would personally be in favor of the U.S. going ahead and taking care of this problem preemptively using military force. I think that's the clear answer here, because there's clearly an impasse on several different issues. The Strait of Hormuz is a major issue. Also, clearly the nuclear dust is a major issue that's being mentioned right here in this post. So I know people don't like war. I don't like war personally either. But I mean, when you're dealing with a country that's operated by terrorists like Iran, you have to deal with them with a strong hand. And I think right now the strong hand is needed, and hopefully we'll see that soon. Because obviously having a weak hand is not doing us any good.
I would definitely have to agree. It's not doing us any good whatsoever at the moment, and it does appear that we're still watching what might possibly end up being a weak hand being played. Also, I have to explain, because so many people say a lot of stuff. Like someone just said it right now. Look at the date and time. It's the 25th of May at 11:45 p.m. Allow me to explain. The world is a globe, and so the sun doesn't shine on the world in the same way across the whole surface of it at the exact same time. So for that reason, there are these things called global time zones. And when the president posted that at 3:45 p.m. on the east coast of the United States of America, if you're in Europe, that's 7 time zones ahead. So that's being reposted in Europe as the posting time, if you're in a European time zone, is 11:45, not 3:45 like it was on the eastern coast of the United States when it was posted. So that's the reason why the timestamp on that post does not line up with it being any reasonable time here in the United States yet, because this was screenshotted within Europe. And when this was posted in Europe, it shows a European timestamp, which was 11:45 p.m. at the time of posting in Europe, 3:45 p.m. at the time of posting on the eastern seaboard of the United States of America. So I hope that does corroborate that that is a legitimate post. And if you do not believe it, you can go to Truth Social and you can see the post on the post of the president's page in black and white text. So it's not a fake post. You can literally go and just find it if you type in Truth Social. Not to plug that website or anything, but it's there. So I hope that does address that the best we can, because that's, one of the cheapest things I've ever heard is people saying that's fake news because the timestamp doesn't add up, like there's not more than one time zone on the planet. But anyways, moving us on from that, we are still waiting for more news coming out at this moment, because we actually don't have any further news, at least on our map right now, of what has been happening and what is led up.
In the meantime, while we don't have any more news from Iran right now, we will be watching for that, by the way, as I suspect we'll probably be getting some more news pretty soon here. So we are keeping a sharp eye on that. Y'all might have seen my short war video earlier today. In the midst of this crazy stuff happening right now on the Iranian coast, there's also some very disturbing stuff coming out of Russia and Ukraine right now. I've just gotten word that apparently Russia is preparing to announce mobilization. That's a new one that I was not able to cover in the video. Apparently, mobilization orders can be seen at military telephones, where the military Russians call for a so-called clarification of data, according to the Russian sources. So it sounds like Russia's getting ready to do outright mobilization from the looks of it. That's a brand new story I was not able to cover earlier. So that's a pretty big one as well. So, Enforcer, would you like to weigh in on that before we jump into the other story as well? Because Putin literally gave the order this morning to what he calls destroy Kyiv, the capital city of Ukraine. He gave that order this morning. And he told the U.S. diplomats to evacuate from the entire city right now. So, I mean, that's a huge impending crisis potentially on our hands right here. But what do you make of this mobilization news?
I would say it's probably showing the Russians are militarily at their absolute limit, like we've been seeing for a while. They're pretty much at the breaking point, and so they're going to try and see if mobilizing anything that's left that's standing that hasn't economically imploded over the past several years might be able to give them that little bit of a push that they need to turn the situation around on the front in their favor. But when I mean in their favor, folks, I don't mean that the Russians are going to turn it around and then steamroll Ukraine and have a happily ever after. At best, they might be able to turn around the frontline situation and take Pokrovsk as a city, and that's it, which might give them a decent negotiating position to say, we could probably keep this thing going longer than Ukraine could, so for that reason, they ought to give in to our demands, and, meet us somewhere in the middle, so that way we can end this whole thing. And that's really probably what the Russians are attempting to achieve at this point, at best, because attempting to take over the entirety of the country is simply never going to happen. The Ukrainian government isn't going to allow it. The Ukrainian people don't really seem to be willing to allow that. The Ukrainian armed forces are still in pretty good morale. They are in the advantage in the frontline position. We've also seen that logistically and economically, the Russians are having a much worse time than the Ukrainians at this point. So most every indicator is in Ukraine's favor. So even if the Russians turn around the situation and get it on their side, they'll never be able to get the Ukrainians to admit to an unconditional surrender or agree to it, because the Ukrainians will never be forced into a position that bad to where they have to accept an unconditional surrender. So I think that's the reason why they're trying to get towards this mobilization, is to start working towards possibly just trying to get into a good position to negotiate and then peace out from.
Yeah, I would say so. It sounds like it to me as well. Also, by the way, like just to give y'all an overview, by the way, because the Enforcer, we had to go live very quick, so the Enforcer didn't have time to grab the Russian news on the whole situation, but I did cover it earlier, so I'm generally familiar with the whole timeline right now. The big news outside this mobilization news that we just got is, once again, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs had just ordered the U.S. diplomats and all foreign diplomats to immediately, they call it ASAP, evacuate from Kyiv, Ukraine. I just put that in the likes tab, by the way, if you want to go grab that post right now. We do have that there. The MFA of Russia is saying, given the so-called continued terrorist attacks, also, by the way, there are none. Russia's making that up. They're saying that the MOD of Russia will be targeting Ukrainian defense industry facilities in Kyiv. They're saying foreign nationals, including diplomatic missions and staff, should leave the city ASAP, because apparently they're going to try to start leveling the entire city, which is so densely populated with civilians. There is no way to discern military from civilian inside of Kyiv. There's just simply no way to do that. So, I mean, that's quite bad right there. But Enforcer, what do you make of that?
I would have to say this is probably just a very significant threat by the Russia. It's supposed to sound threatening and scary. I have a feeling it's probably just going to be a larger drone and missile attack on Kyiv, like we've usually seen in the past, because we haven't ever seen them say that they're going to try and level the whole city, but we have seen them say that everyone ought to leave Kyiv because of what's about to happen, and then it would just be a large drone and missile attack. So I have a feeling that that's probably going to be the case again this time, because we already saw that the attacks yesterday were quite significant in their own right, and we also got this new clip, which was actually a pretty wild one, of a KH-101 caliber cruise missile being hit by a manpad and flung out of its flight path by the explosion. Here's the clip. Here's the incoming missile, there's the manpad hit, and the caliber then goes spiraling out of control overhead. And we see what's left of it right there.
Literally spun it out of its flight path. That's crazy.
I mean, that was nuts. Look at that, folks. It hit and immediately forced it into a tumble. I mean, that was actually pretty wild to watch right there. I've seen a manpad hit missiles plenty of times and detonate them immediately. I've never seen one hit a missile, leaving it intact and then forcing it to tumble from the explosive force. I mean, that was a pretty impressive clip right there. Look at that. I mean, that is insane.
That is nuts. That is crazy, by the way. Also, I'm not sure if you got it or not, but also the Moscow region came under yet another attack this morning. There was drones and stuff flying around the Moscow region earlier as well. So, I mean, that's quite another thing. They're still exchanging pretty large blows with each other between Kyiv and Moscow. Those two capitals are starting to become the hotbed of the war itself, which is wild.
Yeah, it certainly is. There were some major attacks. Sorry about this, folks. We were trying to get on air quickly, and just to be a little bit transparent with y'all, I was assuming we're going to be getting a lot more updates out of the Middle East. So, I didn't put anything down on the map for Ukraine or anything else because I didn't think we'd ever get to covering it. So there were major drone attacks in the morning by the Ukrainians against the Russians. It's just that I don't have any of that down on the map right now because we were going on air just for the Middle East side of things. We also were able
I got you. I got you, though. I'm putting the stuff under the likes tab right now, the main ones that we should probably go over right now about the Russia situation. So I'm actively putting those there right now that we can kind of cover as we go.
All right, so here's that clip that we were actually talking about in Moscow of the incoming drone attacks. It's a little blur out there in the distance that they're watching. That's the drone. We then were also able to see, to get to our next clip here, the drones that allegedly reached Kaliningrad for the first time. This one, I want to say, folks, we're not entirely sure. They did state that there was a drone threat around Kaliningrad, but do we really know? Not quite. We never saw any footage of air defense fire or videos of drones being shot down or drones in the airspace, so it might have just been some form of citywide pandemonium and a alert that was put out for no reason possibly, but it did appear to suggest that there was some sort of ongoing drone attack within the area, but we've never been able to confirm that with video and picture evidence, just to make that somewhat clear. We've also been able to hear as well that, once again, to give you a little bit more information of the drone threats, there was statements that the Rostov region, the Donetsk People's Republic, which is the Donetsk Oblast, the Northwest Republic of Crimea also has a drone threat, and then we were able to see that there was a threat over the entirety of the, let's see, Krasny Urobini. I don't know what that means. It's like
I think that was the Kaliningrad. I think.
Is that? Let's see here. What is Kaliningrad in Cyrillic? Kaliningrad Oblast is called Kaliningrad Oblast in Cyrillic. This says Krasny Urobini, which is something like red something. I don't know what the second word is, but that is not saying Kaliningrad. Actually, that's the Luhansk People's Republic, a warning from the LPR. So wherever that is, unfortunately, I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but it's apparently in the, it's down there. It's the Lipetsk region, not the Luhansk region. It's Lipetsk. So we then also were able to hear that apparently there was some sort of a drone threat near Gorlovka, which is, I believe, also in the Donetsk People's Republic. There was also a drone alert within the Bryansk region near to the Ukrainian border, and then there was a new drone threat that that emerged over west and northwest Crimea, which is generally the area near to the city of Sevastopol and the western coastline closest to the Ukrainian coast, near to the city of Odessa. So that's generally where we were seeing most of the drone threats coming out. And once again, we did see that flights were diverted around Kaliningrad, but we were never able to get full-on confirmation that there were actual drones in the air there. It just appears that the Russians were scared that there were drones, but we never saw any footage from anyone in the Kaliningrad Oblast to prove that.
Yeah, the Russians were sounding off alarms left and right inside of Kaliningrad. They were sounding off alarms. They were sending out alert to people's phones. They were acting like it was a full-on attack. But my question is like, how are the drones getting to Kaliningrad? Is it, if coming from Ukraine, they'd have to go through Belarus or they'd have to go through Poland, one or the other. So it's like, there was no reports of Belarusian incursions. There was also no reports of Poland's airspace being intruded on either. So I don't know how they'd even get there.
Well, I mean, they'd have to go through Poland or Lithuania, which are both NATO states, because there's no way to get there just through Russian countries or Russian-aligned countries alone. And we never really have seen Ukraine launch drone attacks through Belarusian territory on Russia before. So really, I mean, it's honestly kind of to be straight up with everyone, it's really an outlandish story. From what we know, there's really no way for Ukrainian drone to even make it to Kaliningrad. So while the Russians acted like there were drones in Kaliningrad, we don't have any proof of it, and physically, that'd be damn near impossible for a Ukrainian drone to make it to Kaliningrad without someone somewhere saying that there's a Ukrainian drone in the air over a country they're not supposed to be in flying to Kaliningrad, which we never saw, and then we never saw any video or picture evidence in Kaliningrad showing that the drones had made it there. So I think it was some sort of city pandemonium or oblast-wide pandemonium that happened there, and that was probably about it. But also, do we have any other news and developments that we would like?
Yes, we do. We have actually two or three other ones, by the way. We have the official statements from Russian state media showing what they're saying is the reason why they're going to try to level Kyiv once again. They're claiming that Starobilsk, that alleged terror attack that Ukraine did not conduct, by the way, they're saying that's the reason why apparently they're going to try to level Kyiv. So if you want to read off what the Russian foreign ministry is saying here, this is coming from Russian state media on Telegram. We can take a look at that.
And really quickly, folks, I want to show you all this here really quickly so that way we can get the information out. Many people not many people, some people in Russia are claiming that the Ukrainians conducted an act of terror by striking a building in the city of Starobilsk, which is in the Luhansk Oblast, with a form of some sort of a drone or a missile. They're claiming that it hit the building and it killed dozens of people. Now, the problem with this is that as far as attacks go, if the Russian Federation hits a drone with electronic warfare interference and it goes errant and it hits a building, at that point, it is what it is. Like, if, for example, that's like saying, the Ukrainians build a rifle, so some guy in Germany takes it and he mows down 30 people, and so it's the guy, who made the rifle, he's to blame for the whole attack. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's more so the guy who took the rifle and massacred all of the people. So generally, it wouldn't really be Ukraine's fault if it was electronic warfare interference that flung this drone into the building. And also on top of that, we never got any video or picture evidence proof that any Ukrainian munitions or ordnance deliberately or unintentionally hit this building and caused the significant losses that we heard of. Also, on top of that, another important thing to remember is that if this is enough to break the camel's back, according to the Russians, what in the hell was Mariupol? The Russians killed 50,000 Ukrainian civilians in the city of Mariupol over the course of 2 months, and that apparently was nothing. That wasn't even anything to be remembered. And right now, a lot of those bodies are out here in this mass grave. There's all 50,000 of them right here in this giant mass cemetery that's been here since the end of the battle. But apparently that's nothing to bat an eye about. But if God forbid a Ukrainian drone gets interfered with Russian electronic warfare, and then it ends up possibly careening into a building, and we can't even confirm that. We don't even know what hit the building. But according to the Russians, that's the straw that broke the camel's back to them, which is absolutely stupid. But let me read you all what the Russians are saying according to TASS, so that we all can get the real understanding of what the Russians are saying with that incident in mind. The Russian Federation recommends that foreigners leave Kyiv as soon as possible, and its residents not to approach military and administrative infrastructure facilities, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported. The attack on Starobilsk has exhausted the patience, and the Russian armed forces are starting to systematically strike Ukrainian defense industry enterprises in Kyiv, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. According to the Foreign Ministry statements, the Russian Federation will strike at both decision-making centers and at command posts in Ukraine. So that is the statements that they're making right now, and they are claiming that these attacks on Kyiv are going to be conducted in reprisal of the Starobilsk attacks, which is, once again, pretty stupid. It's like, the Ukrainians clearly didn't hit that building, and if a Ukrainian drone did hit the building, it was certainly not intentional. We've never seen the Ukrainians go out of their way in the entirety of the war to inflict civilian casualties, but in Kyiv alone, we can confirm that 4 civilians were killed in just yesterday's attacks by the Russians. So it's not really, it's a fairly unfair sort of a principle here that's being applied. Because if the Ukrainians were trying to get even with the Russians, the Ukrainians would have to kill probably about 200,000 Russian civilians at this point to even get close to how many Ukrainian civilians have been killed by the Russian army in the war in Ukraine. So, certainly not getting close to where reciprocal action needs to be conducted. And not only that, this drone hit a city that's in occupied Ukraine. That's technically Ukrainian people that would have been hit by the drone. So I don't really understand a whole lot here of what the argument by the Russians really is. But a lot of people are talking about what the Russians are aiming to do with this evacuation order and what they may be planning as a result of it. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so is Putin bluffing with this, or is he actually intend to follow through with his threat? Because right now, they are threatening to basically destroy Kyiv. And also, there's some back channel information, like on channels like Fighter Bomber, and they're saying that they hope that Kyiv gets destroyed. And that's not the only one, by the way. There's a couple of other ones saying that as well. So the Russian propagandists, they are going for this full on. Like, they want this to happen, and they're hoping that Kyiv gets destroyed. So this is clearly a desperate move by Putin. He's getting backed into a corner. He's getting nonstop attacks on Moscow. He's also getting nonstop attacks on his logistics routes on the rear lines inside of occupied Ukraine, which is pretty much bringing their front line supply situation to a screeching halt. So what do you think is going to happen? 54% said Putin will try to attack and destroy Kyiv, but will fail to destroy it. 26% said yes, Putin will destroy Kyiv, and 15% said no, Putin is simply bluffing on this like he has done before. And I would say that I believe that Putin is at the point he's going to try to do something like this, but whether or not he's going to succeed, that's a big question mark. Also, by the way, we have to keep in mind that Ukraine currently possesses a full retaliation spectrum that they can launch on Moscow. The new Flamingo, which is the FP5 missile that Ukraine wields, that is as potent as a Tomahawk missile, which is what the U.S. fields. The only difference is we think that maybe the Flamingo might be slightly less accurate than a Tomahawk, but it still carries a massive warload on that thing, or a payload, not a warload, but a payload. So it carries a massive payload, and if Ukraine decides to retaliate on Moscow, I mean, we could be looking at like total destruction in both capitals, actually. So I think Putin knows that. So that might hamper down the response a little bit that Putin's expecting to do. So I think Putin's going to try, but ultimately he will fail, and that we could see a very bad escalation come out of this. I'm with the 52%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I'm with the 52% as well. There really is no way the Russians can actually destroy or level Kyiv in reality. They do not have the kind of ordnance or capabilities to actually do something like that. This is more so just hype and threats and whatnot, leading up to an attack that's probably going to end up being fairly underwhelming. We've heard many times from the Russians before that whatever the Ukrainians did, that was it. That broke the camel's back, and now everything's off. All the bets are off. They're going all in. And what would happen is that they would launch just a slightly larger drone attack than normal, and that was the response. So I would assume that right now that's probably what we're going to be watching in Kyiv, is just another major drone and missile attack, and it's going to cause damage, but it's not going to level the whole city. And in reality, it really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to see that diplomats are evacuated. One thing that is interesting, though, is that the Russians know that they're just throwing these missiles and drones wildly into Kyiv, and they're killing a whole bunch of random people. That's probably why they're telling all of these diplomats to leave, is there's a high chance that one of them could just land right on top of an embassy and kill a whole bunch of embassy staff if they're still there inside of Kyiv. So that's probably the reason why they're putting out the warning, is because they know they're just going to be attacking civilians indiscriminately like they normally do. And so the drone could hit anyone anywhere and possibly end up killing anyone in the city, including foreign diplomats. But I don't think they're going to achieve anything of great success in this attack. And on top of that, it's not like Kyiv is needed to run the country. On the other hand, Moscow is needed to run the Russian Federation, because without Moscow, there really isn't a place that could exist as a proper seat of government for the Russian Federation, because they have made it to be the perch that the Russian government has to sit on top of. Without Moscow, the Russian government has nothing. And if Ukraine continues to attack Moscow and continues to sow fear in the public in that city, the Russian government, the central government that is, might not have anywhere to go if things start getting pretty bad and pretty panicked in the city of Moscow and riots and civil unrest begin to ensue. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But that would be my 2 cents on that matter right now. And so with that, we are hopefully going to be seeing that some more news comes out from the Middle East. And do we have anything at this moment right now?
So right now, the news is pretty much silent out of the Middle East. So that situation has largely come to a screeching halt right now. So that's kind of surprising, actually. We have not heard any statements out of the Iranian government, and we've not seen any retaliatory strikes taking place, at least right now. That doesn't mean they're not going to happen, but it looks like Iran's taking a minute to compose themselves, if that's even possible, to see what they're going to do, and also maybe send 1,000 different couriers to go find the flamboyant leader, Mujtaba, in his closet, wherever he's at. So we'll have to see if maybe something happen soon. But in the meantime, though, we do have 3 more pretty large stories out of Russia and Ukraine, by the way, that we can go over in the meantime. We do have a story here. I was label them off, Enforcer. I put them under the likes tab, but I'll give people a summary of what we're about to go over. We did see that apparently the Russians were transporting some North Korean soldiers in Nizhny Novgorod inside of mainland Russia, and their bus wrecked. It careened off a road, and believe it or not, the North Koreans were taken out by a gazelle, and people thought I was referring to a Ukrainian drone, but that's not a drone, that's an animal. So they were taken out by a gazelle, of all things. So the North Koreans have a bad run of luck, to say the least. Also, we have seen continued rear line attacks on Russian logistics nonstop, and we've gotten a compilation showing literally, I can't even count how many it is, Russian logistics forces that have been hit left and right behind the lines. We'll get to that in a second. And also, our third major story as well is we do have some news about the Oreshnik missile, that attack that happened the other day, that apparently Russia fired 2 Oreshnik IRBM missiles, not just one, and we just heard about the second and got footage from it that we can show you right now on the air. So those are the 3 stories, but let's start off with our North Korean gazelle story, because I think the gazelle had a word with those North Koreans.
They did. The whole front of this charter bus appears to have caved in, and from what we know, 1 North Korean was killed in this gazelle attack. And many people in Matthew's video comment section today were going, "Oh, the Enforcer Matt got it wrong. It wasn't a gazelle. It was a new Ukrainian drone. 1,000 miles in Russia hitting a bus for some reason." The reality of it is that it's Mongolian gazelle pictured here or here. This is the female version of the Mongolian gazelle. This is the male Mongolian gazelle.
Apparently that thing's got some weight behind it, because it took out that big old tour bus like it was like a paperweight. Like, this thing right here's serious, man. This thing looks fluffy, it looks cute, but this thing's a menace.
Man, under this fur coat, man, if you take your hands, grab that fur, and then yank it, it comes off like a blanket, and underneath is just solid lead. Because this thing imploded the front of this bus. I mean, it just caved the thing in completely. And so a North Korean got killed by a gazelle. So the last thing that this North Korean had going through his mind was a gazelle, or food, which in North Korea, they've never seen gazelles, or most animals for that matter. They've eaten all of them. So it was probably quite a shock for him to see such a large animal flying through the windshield of the bus and caving in the whole front of the thing. But moving us on out of that, which is absolutely crazy. And also, by the way, this happened in the Nizhny Novgorod region, heading to Tatarstan. So this is way up about here in Yaroslavl. That's about where this happened. So this is nowhere close to where a Ukrainian drone will be hitting a bus. At that distance, Ukrainian drones can hit things. They're not hitting buses, though. Highly unlikely. So the guy literally got killed by a Mongolian gazelle. We also
see the video.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's a short one, though. It just shows the caved in front of the bus and a couple of folks hanging out. But
damn. Yeah, well, look at the front of the bus, though. That's why I was wanting to watch the video here. The front of the bus is just demolished. Also, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that gazelle probably did not make it. So I see people saying, "Is the gazelle okay?" I don't think the gazelle's okay. I think he might be hurt. That's putting it mildly. I don't think that gazelle made it. I think it. Who knows where that thing went? It could be in the bus, for all we know. It could have actually gone through the windshield from the looks of it. But yeah, it was basically like a nuke going off on the front of this bus. Those North Koreans really got it.
I heard, folks, that this Mongolian was actually a Manchurian candidate, and Zelensky had to go up to him on the side of the road, and he said, "Bus, fire truck, red, 35." And then the gazelle didn't do anything, and he said, "Ah, I see, it's a Mongolian one." And then it went, and then it ran right in front of the bus. It was really magical, honestly. I mean, like, the way you can get those things to do stuff, it's incredible. Because, honestly, the Ukrainians are looking into this whole thing as being a possible rear-line attack weapon with how much damage these things are able to cause at this point. Pretty impressive. But moving us on from that bit of news, we also were able to see some of Ukraine's attacks on the M14 highway. The M14 highway is a major highway that exists within the area of southern Ukraine, or it's also called the E58 here, but I generally called it the M14 because that's what we were reporting it as yesterday. We were able to see that a significant amount of attacks were conducted on this highway on a myriad of Russian supply trucks and armored cars, largely knocking them out and destroying them before they could even make it to the front. This kind of supply impact is causing significant problems for the Russian armed forces on the front line, as they are no longer able to get the required tonnage of supplies to be able to keep the front lines at full operation and fully armed to be able to continue offensive and defensive operations across the length of the southern front. For this reason, the Russians are starting to find themselves in a very precarious situation and may start to see that their offensive near to the town of Huilopol begins to fizzle out.
It's just wild to see nonstop hit after hit like that. I mean, it's truly insane. And what's wild is it just came out of nowhere. Like, Ukraine had been doing this on and off, but the nonstop, consistent strikes that we're seeing right here in this video and over the past couple of days, it's like Ukraine just turned on the tap, and it hasn't stopped ever since, which is insane. I'm even seeing reports and Telegram posts from Russian forces in the area. They're complaining of a drone shortage. They're not able to get FPV drones to the front lines in enough numbers to hold off the Ukrainians, and I believe it's because the supply trucks aren't making it to the front because they're getting hit.
I would have to agree. I think that's certainly the case, and it looks like these sorts of supply impacts are having a significant issue for the Russian Federation and their armed forces. Additionally, we were also able to see something else that's quite interesting. Russia did fire a second Oreshnik that we never reported on air, because nobody really knew that it even existed. But a security camera in the area of Donetsk Oblast, north of Donetsk City, actually did catch one of these IRBMs, an Oreshnik, making landfall in the area. However, this is something interesting. This is north of Donetsk City. If we look north of Donetsk City, that's mostly occupied Russian territory. So from what we can tell, this thing may have actually landed in occupied territory in Ukraine instead of anywhere inside of Ukraine itself. We didn't get to confirm that this landed on the battlefield at Konstantinivka, which is directly north of Donetsk, but we didn't hear of that. It was apparently just north of the city of Donetsk, meaning that it was just a little bit of ways away and was apparently within occupied territory. But we were able to see this footage here from the area showing the IRBMs making impact with the ground. And there they are.
That does appear to be re-entry vehicles.
It certainly does appear to be in the same sequence. The thing is, though, folks, is that it doesn't really make a lot of sense if it landed in Russian-occupied territory. It's supposed to be a threat, a signal against Ukraine. Why the hell did it land in a place that Russia was controlling? And also, we haven't heard the Ukrainians confirm of the second impact or damage from it, so it's clearly not in Ukrainian territory, it's in Russian territory. So the question here is, why did it land there? And the only answer that we can come up with is that it was faulty and must have had some sort of critical failure, and so it ended up landing short in occupied Russian territory.
Mr. Faulty, the missile doesn't like Mr. Faulty. Really, the missile, like, these things are a wild card. Like, the Oreshnik, like, we've been making fun of that missile for a while, like, ever since the Russians have had several failures with it. That thing's a wild card. You could launch that thing and it could go like a Looney Tunes, like, balloon out of control that's, like, losing its air. It could just, like, go all over the place. You don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if the Russians intended to actually strike Donetsk, because it's a strange place to hit, to say the least. And we believe that they were going all for Kyiv. And the one that did hit near Kyiv didn't even hit Kyiv itself. It hit an airfield outside of Kyiv. So, I mean, I don't know how to explain this other than it's probably a huge malfunction, but, I mean, this Oreshnik, it costs a hell of a lot of money to be this unreliable.
Also, if this thing was nuclear equipped, they would have nuked Donetsk, which is a major supply hub, because it missed. So, I mean, that's not really good for a reliability purpose, you know, to have a missile laying short on a major supply hub of your own army that's fighting in Ukraine. It's not really a good thing, you know. So it does appear clear at this point. The Oreshnik, although it does work sometimes, is still having some critical faults and failings at this point. But with that, I think that is actually all of the breaking news that we have to cover at this point right now. We might be getting some here in the very near future, but actually, we have some coming out right now. So what do we got?
Okay, so we have some breaking news right now back in the Middle East. It looks like Israel is under attack, and we had just heard that Israel was ramping up their attacks in Lebanon, specifically in the suburbs around Beirut, which is the capital, and it looks like we're now hearing about drone incursions that have just started in northern Israel. We did see this last night, actually, so we know now it's not a false alarm. This is probably a real alert that we're seeing right here. So there's been a drone incursion, it looks like near Mount Meron, from the looks of it, if that's how you pronounce it. So it looks like we could be seeing the first possible retaliation from Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy force, on Israel after they just ramped up attacks on their forces. So that's a big one.
It's an attack, folks, on the town of Sessa. They attacked Sessa near Mount Moron. This is apparently where most U.S. politicians come from. I didn't know. But beyond that, we were able to hear that there was one bottle rocket fired at the town of Sassy, north of Mount Moron. So we are hearing that at the moment. We'll hopefully be getting some more information on that here soon. Let's take a little look at the. Apparently, I'm sorry, everyone. We actually can't look at this town for some reason. What the hell's up with that? I thought that's really weird. You can go anywhere in Israel but this town. That's kind of interesting.
It's a closed town. It's that the company town. They don't let you in there, by the way. Also, by the way, since we can't see the town right here, I do have something else that we can show people. Speaking of Israel and Hezbollah going at it, there was a ground operation inside of Lebanon, by the way, in southern Lebanon that the Israelis were conducting. And we had seen a whole bunch of videos start coming out showing the Israeli tanks and armored vehicles getting attacked by what appeared to be Russian-style FPV drones that are being used in the Ukraine war. So I just put a video there. I put it in the likes tab. If you refresh it, you should see it pop up at the top. It looks like the Hezbollah forces are using these quite heavily now. And it looks like, you can't really distinguish this from the battlefield in Ukraine and Russia for the most part. It looks like it.
It really does. You can also see a couple of people inside this building. Actually, looks like this might be some sort of headquarters for the Israelis within the area. It looks like they had some sort of screen set up on the lower floor, but the drone flew straight in and apparently hit the location dead on. So we are understanding, by the way, folks, that the Israelis are taking a significantly higher amount of casualties and fatalities in southern Lebanon at this point because of the use of FPV drones. And so far, we've seen that Israeli doctrine in almost no way ever has changed. It's actually a little bit ironic because the Israelis fight war a lot like the Russians do. They just pick one doctrine and stick with it and never change it no matter what. We haven't seen them change any way that they're fighting the war in southern Lebanon at this point, at least publicly. And we also haven't even seen a difference in their air defenses and how they fight incoming air threats, even with them being overwhelmed by hundreds of drones during the war that happened earlier this year when their air defenses were completely overwhelmed and most everything was making it through after a couple of weeks. So it's a little bit interesting to watch that because, for the Israelis to kind of talk about, how impressive and advanced their military is, it seems like they're fairly slow to adapt to a changing environment in the war. But we actually have one more news story to cover. So what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so now that we've covered all of our news out of Israel and that whole situation, once again, the news out of the Middle East has largely come to a temporary pause at the moment, so sadly, can't report much about that. We're about to get into our questions in a second after we hit this one more big news story that we have right now, but we'll have to see if anything comes out during the question segment here in a second about that Iran situation. But there's another story. If you go to the likes tab, you'll see it. There is now another developing situation around Moscow. The gasoline shortages that began in Crimea just days ago are now reaching right outside of Moscow. They're reaching the city of Tver, which is to the northwest of Moscow, and we had already discussed this on stream several times before. If these gasoline shortages spread beyond Crimea at all, then that's probably a bad sign and a bad omen for the Russian Federation. They're probably going to start having these all over the place. Also, can anybody not hear me? I'm seeing people who can't hear me.
Oh, no, I can hear you fine.
I think maybe some people are not hearing me or something like that. I'm going silent apparently. But anyways, though, outside of that, hopefully people can hear me. But it sounds like Moscow is starting to experience that already, and Crimea was the first victim of it, and now it looks like Moscow is as well. And the reason why this is because Ukraine's been slamming central Russian refineries left and right, and that's why we're starting to see this real world result catching up to the Russians. But unfortunately, what do you make of this? Because this is pretty quick.
This is looking pretty bad. We've already known that fuel shortages were going to start becoming widespread around Russia, but it now appears that it's even reaching capital cities or getting very close to capital cities like Moscow. This is in the city of Tver, which is in the Tver Oblast, just north of Moscow, which you can see right here, and it is only 80 miles away. This is not far. So for that reason, we were understanding that everywhere in Russia there is a critical fuel shortage, except for Moscow and St. Petersburg. So I would generally have to say that, in my opinion, this is looking pretty desperate for the Russian Federation, and it does look like very soon their economy is mostly going to grind to a halt, and their military probably will as well. We also were able to see, once again, a lot of people were complaining about this in the Tver region, and also Tver is right there. Just in case you all are wondering, there's Moscow, and then up the road is Tver. Over here is Yaroslavl. That's kind of a cool fact. That's the Volga River, by the way.
Man, I'll tell you what, it's really a cascade. Like when you really think about it, I was covering that in the video earlier today, how much of a cascade of bad effects are really hitting the Russian Federation. They're having the rear line logistics getting basically failed to a large degree because of all the FPV attacks that Ukraine's conducting. There's the gas rationing and the shortages that are starting to spread like wildfire very quickly, much more quickly than I thought they were going to spread. Also, Putin's popularity going through the toilet, the failed ban, and also the ban on VPNs and the firewall that the Russians are trying to put up to prevent the Russians from communicating with each other. That was a huge failure. And also, they're about to get pushed back on the front lines because once their logistics collapse, they can't supply the troops at the front with ammo and food and supplies. So therefore, it's going to collapse. How much bad? And also, not to mention the attacks on Moscow. I almost forgot about that too. The daily attacks on Moscow. That's literally prodding the Russian civilians to start basically uprising against the Putin regime. It's literally a cascade. It's a lot of stuff going on right now. I think we're about to see some big escalations.
Also, I saw someone say, is the gas situation so bad in Russia that they're having to lower the speed limits? Generally not, because the roads already look like this, and the fastest speed you can get on that's like 15, so no.
Yeah, those roads kind of suck. It kind of looks like American roads a little bit in some places of the country at least, but yeah, I don't think they're going too fast in their lot is.
This is right outside of Yaroslavl, man. I don't think American roads look like that. Some American roads are pretty rough, like in places like Detroit. I'm sorry, everyone. We just got in thousands of letters in the mail about making fun of Detroit. So we're going to have to go pick their relative Chicago. It's not like the roads in Chicago, that bad off. It's a lot better here in America than it is over there. Over there, they might not even have paved roads. They might just be dirt. And then you're in, a pretty bad place. Look at that. You can't drive over a road like that. That's horrific, really.
This is dirt with a side of road.
Or this one, the Kolyma Highway. That's not even a highway. That's literally just a gravel path.
Honestly, it kind of is, really. It looks like a logging road.
Or this one. Honestly, that kind of does look like a road in Alabama. Or how about this one? That's a pretty bad one. And this one as well. A lot of roads are like that in Russia, you know, folks. I would put money on it that if I drop y'all down on a random Russian road right now, it's going to look like that. Let's take a gander. Yep.
Oh man, they got that gravel special. It's pretty level for a gravel road, I will say that. But can you imagine a lot of with like basic spring suspension going over something like this? You're probably bouncing around like Scooby Doo and the gang in the mystery van.
Man, honestly, man, I think your brain gets rattled so badly you might pick up alcoholism by the time you're off this road.
Oh, they already had that anyway. They don't have to worry about it.
Probably. Like that. What take that? Man, oh man, one more shot. You know, some people might say we were just lucky, so we're gonna do one more, just randomly on this road right here. Yeah, this isn't even paved. This is literally just dirt.
Man, this is where they take people out and do something to them.
Jeez, and this is a legitimate road. Like they have road signs up and everything on a dirt road. You know, it's just wild when you think about that, folks. You know, Russia is a place in this world that a lot of people really hype up a whole lot, and yet they don't have a single paved road anywhere. And I saw someone say, "Are you city slickers?" No, we grew up in the country our whole life. We moved into the cities recently. But you know, even in the countryside, there were paved roads. Like, you know, that'd be unheard of to say in America, unless you're in like the Midwest where they're growing corn and whatnot, like Nebraska. It's unheard of to not have a paved road here in the United States anymore, unless you're in a place that has literally nobody living in it. So, anyways. With that, I hope that does address that well. And it looks like, folks, we have covered most of the news that has broken out at this moment right now. But I do have to say, folks, that I have to give a humongous shout out on behalf of both of us for all of y'all watching so far. So far at the peak tonight, we've had 20.2 thousand people here, and 130,000 people have watched this stream in an hour and 21 minutes. And I got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative of so many of y'all continuing to choose this channel as your primary source of news. And I hope that we're able to break this story to y'all as quickly and rapidly, and also as well detailed as we can, with a decent amount of analysis of where it's probably going to be going here in the very near future. With that in mind, we are going to be getting on into answering questions. Breaking news might happen intermittently during the question segment, so make sure to stick around. You might miss a major development if you leave. So, you know, make sure to just hang tight, and something might happen here in the near future. But generally, we're going to be rounding this thing probably on out at this point. Also, by the way, Matthew, if you could you filibuster for a little bit, because I haven't had a drop of water all day long, and my throat is burning and on fire from talking nonstop without it having water. So just filibuster real quick.
Yeah, go get you some water, go get you some aqua. But in the meantime, folks, though, hopefully we don't get off the air here shortly and then the Iranians decide to launch a strike. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We'll probably be on the air for another hour or so, I would imagine, answering questions and getting to super chats as well. So if there is something that's going to happen over the next hour, we will be here to cover it, of course. But right now, though, I'm really surprised we have not heard anything yet, because the Iranians might be, the enforcer could be right, they might be about to try to ignore the situation in the hopes of just holding out and keeping the U.S. waiting and stalling out the talks. Because like the enforcer also mentioned as well, right now, the Iranians are basically in the driver's seat as they're sitting back and waiting, because all they have to do is simply survive to try to win the situation. They just simply have to sit back, survive, and try not to get hit. That's all they have to do. The U.S. has to do something militarily to reopen the strait. So, I mean, we have to take action if we want to win. Iran just has to sit back and simply live and survive. So that's a big different calculus between the two. So even though this is probably a big ego blow to the Iranians, I'd imagine, it may not be enough to tip them over the retaliation threshold, to say the least. So we'll have to see with that. But in the meantime, though, it is time to jump into some questions, some super chats, etc. And the enforcer will be back in just a second. He'll be able to weigh in as well to these. But our first one here goes to Cerebrus3, who puts in a $100 support. And thank you very much, Cerebrus, for that very generous support right there. One of the largest ones of the day. Not the night, but the day. And Cerebrus said, Happy Memorial Day, enforcers in chat. Regardless of what's going on in the world, I hope you can spend time with family and friends and take care of yourselves and others. And one from the chat, please.
Hey, and a humongous thanks to you for the incredible support, Cerebrus3, and helping this channel to keep on running. And it is Memorial Day. You know, we actually got out and wandered around a little bit, took a little walk, you know, and acting crazy and silly. We didn't even care no more. And then this thing happened, and then we had to, like, race back home. I don't know what it was, but on that walk today, folks, I think something, like, I pulled some sort of a muscle in my leg, because my left leg was on fire, like, badly. It did not feel good at all to go for a walk today. And usually, I'm a big fan of walks and hikes, but my left leg today was doing so badly, I couldn't even hardly move my foot my left foot by the time I was done walking. Like, I hardly even pivoted and swivel it. Now I can. Like, I don't know what it was with that. It was really weird, but that was a pretty fun thing to do. And I hope that everybody is enjoying their Memorial Day with their family and friends, because it's always a fun thing to get to enjoy holidays like these. This holiday is a little bit more of a somber one than others, because this is the day that we remember all of those who have fallen in the service of our nation, and also those who have been important in guiding our nation in times prior. But a humongous thanks to you for the incredible support, and help this channel keep on running. And with that, we will make sure to get one from the chat in your honor. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the live chat question in honor of Cerebrus3 is going to go to none other than Andrew Acton. And Andrew said, why doesn't the U.S. use A-10 Warthogs and Apache helicopters in mixed waves to reopen the Strait of Hormuz?
Generally, the reason why the A-10 Warthogs are not used is because you would have to use them in closer proximity to the boats, and if they have a man pad, that could pose a pretty significant issue. To A-10 Warthogs using strafing runs would have to be in less than in range, a mile away from their target, and that is well within man pad range. And so generally that would be considered too big of a risk for Apaches, well, more so Warthogs, to be able to try and conduct that sort of an action. So for that reason, they would mostly start leaning towards AH-64 Apaches, just conducting significant amounts of attacks on the fast attack boats and destroying them with AGM-114 Hellfires from 7 miles away or farther. The problem, though, with the idea of just using A-10s and Apaches only is that